The champagne glass slipped from Jonathan Carter's fingers, shattering against the marble floor of his own penthouse as he watched the woman he'd loved in silence for 5 years accept another man's proposal. The sound of breaking crystal was nothing compared to the sound of his heart breaking as Tanya Williams, his brilliant, beautiful assistant, said yes to Michael Rodriguez with tears of joy streaming down her face. The company party buzzed around him, but Jonathan felt frozen in time. Everyone was celebrating the quarter's record profits, but all he could see was Tanya's radiant smile as she looked at the diamond ring now sparkling on her finger. She was wearing the navy blue dress he'd complimented her on that morning, the one that made her dark skin glow under the office lights. Her natural hair was styled in loose curls that framed her face perfectly, and when she laughed at something Michael whispered in her ear, Jonathan felt like he might be sick. Congratulations seem to be in order, his business partner Richard Thompson said beside him, following Jonathan's gaze to the happy couple. Though you look like you've seen a ghost. Jonathan forced himself to look away, bending down to pick up the larger pieces of broken glass. Just surprised, that's all. She never mentioned he was planning to propose. But that wasn't entirely true. For weeks, Tanya had been distant, distracted. Phone calls that made her blush, lunch dates she tried to keep quiet about, the way she'd started leaving exactly at 5 instead of staying late to help him prepare for meetings. All the signs had been there, but he'd been too stubborn, too afraid, too caught up in maintaining their professional relationship to ask her about it. Now it was too late. Sir? Tanya's voice cut through his thoughts, and he looked up to find her standing in front of him, her left hand carefully hidden behind her back. Her brown eyes were bright with happiness, but there was something else there too. Uncertainty, maybe even sadness. Are you all right? You're bleeding. He looked down at his hands and saw that he'd cut his palm on the broken glass. Blood was dripping onto his white shirt, staining the expensive fabric. It's nothing, he said, wrapping a napkin around the cut. Congratulations, by the way. Michael seems like a good man. The words tasted like ash in his mouth, but he forced them out anyway. Because that was what you did when someone you loved found happiness, even if it wasn't with you. You smiled and congratulated them and pretended your world wasn't falling apart. Tanya's smile faltered slightly. Thank you. That means a lot, coming from you. She paused, looking like she wanted to say something else, but Michael appeared at her side, sliding his arm around her waist possessively. There you are, beautiful, Michael said, kissing her temple. People want to congratulate us. He nodded politely at Jonathan. Thanks for hosting such a great party, Mr. Carter. Tanya's told me so much about you. Jonathan wondered what exactly Tanya had said about him. Probably that he was a demanding boss who worked too much and had no personal life. Which was true, but only because the one person he wanted in his personal life was standing right in front of him, engaged to someone else. The pleasure's all mine, Jonathan replied, shaking Michael's hand with his uninjured one. You're a lucky man. Don't I know it? Michael grinned, pulling Tanya closer. I still can't believe she said yes. Neither could Jonathan. Not because Tanya wasn't incredible enough to deserve love and marriage and happiness, but because somewhere in the back of his mind, he'd always believed that someday somehow he would find the courage to tell her how he felt. He'd imagined a different scene entirely, one where he was the one putting a ring on her finger, where she was smiling at him like that. But he'd waited too long. He'd let fear and professionalism and his own insecurities get in the way, and now she was lost to him forever. We should get you to a doctor, Tanya said, looking concerned as blood seeped through the napkin around his hand. That cut looks deep. I'm fine, he said again, but she was already moving toward him, reaching for his injured hand with the same gentle efficiency she brought to everything else. Her touch was warm and familiar, and for a moment he forgot about Michael, forgot about the ring, forgot about everything except the way she was looking at him with such genuine concern. Let me at least get you a proper bandage from the first aid kit in your office, she said. You can't bleed all over your own party. But before she could lead him away, Michael stepped between them. I'll take care of it, honey, he said to Tanya, then looked at Jonathan. No offense, Mr. Carter, but I think my fiancée has done enough taking care of her boss for one evening. This is supposed to be our celebration after all. The possessiveness in Michael's voice made Jonathan's jaw clench, but Tanya just nodded and stepped back. Of course. You're right. She looked at Jonathan one more time. Please take care of that cut. And thank you again for the party. It was perfect. Perfect. Jonathan watched them walk away, Michael's hand on the small of Tanya's back, guiding her toward the crowd of well-wishers. The party that was supposed to celebrate their company's success had turned into an engagement celebration, and Jonathan was left standing alone in the middle of his own penthouse, bleeding onto his marble floor and wondering how he'd let the best thing in his life slip through his fingers without a fight. The truth was, he'd been in love with Tanya Williams since her second day on the job. But he'd never told her, never even hinted at it, because he'd convinced himself that she deserved better than a workaholic billionaire who didn't know how to separate business from personal life. He'd told himself he was protecting her, protecting their working relationship, protecting both of them from the complications that would come with mixing romance and business. But watching her accept another man's proposal, seeing the pure joy on her face as she looked at someone who wasn't him, Jonathan realized that his protection had been nothing more than cowardice. And now it was too late to do anything about it. The party continued around him, but Jonathan felt like he was watching it from underwater. Everything was muffled and distant, including his own heartbeat. He'd built an empire worth billions, had been featured on magazine covers and business shows, had been called one of the most eligible bachelors in the country. But none of that meant anything without the one person who truly knew him, who challenged him, who made him want to be better than he was. And now she was engaged to someone else. Tanya Williams adjusted her blazer for the 10th time as she waited in the reception area of Carter Industries. The building's 42nd floor offered a stunning view of the city, but she was too nervous to appreciate it. This job interview could change everything for her, and she couldn't afford to mess it up. She'd been working as a junior assistant at a small law firm for 2 years, barely making enough to cover her student loans and the rent on her tiny apartment. When she'd seen the posting for an executive assistant position at Carter Industries, she'd almost not applied. The salary was more than she'd ever dreamed of making, and Jonathan Carter was known for being impossibly demanding. But her best friend Lisa had pushed her to try anyway. The worst they can do is say no, Lisa had said. But what if they say yes? Now, sitting in the sleek reception area with its glass walls and modern art, Tanya wondered if she was in over her head. The other candidates she'd seen leaving looked like they belonged in this world of power suits and expensive watches. She smoothed down her skirt, which she'd bought specifically for this interview, and tried to project confidence she didn't feel. "Miss Williams?" A woman in her 50s appeared beside her. "Mr. Carter will see you now." Tanya followed her down a long hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. At the end was a corner office that seemed to take up half the floor. The woman knocked once and opened the door. "Sir, Miss Williams is here for the interview. Send her in." The voice was deep, authoritative, and somehow familiar, though Tanya was sure she'd never met Jonathan Carter before. She stepped into the office and immediately felt intimidated. The space was huge, with a sitting area, a conference table, and a massive desk that faced the windows. Behind the desk sat Jonathan Carter, and Tanya had to remind herself to breathe. She'd seen his picture in magazines, of course, but they didn't do him justice. He was tall even sitting down, with broad shoulders and dark hair that was perfectly styled but looked like he'd been running his hands through it. His blue eyes were sharp and intelligent, and when he looked up at her from the resume he'd been reading, she felt like he could see right through her. "Miss Williams," he said, standing and coming around the desk to shake her hand. "Thank you for coming in. Please have a seat." His handshake was firm and confident, and Tanya tried to match his energy as she sat down in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. He was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than she made in 3 months, but there was something approachable about him despite his obvious wealth and power. "I have to be honest," he said, settling back into his chair. "Your resume is impressive, but you don't have experience as an executive assistant. Most of the people I've interviewed today have worked for CEOs before. Why should I take a chance on you?" It was a fair question and one she'd been preparing for. "Because I'm not afraid of hard work and I learn fast," she said. "I may not have experience with a CEO, but I know how to handle pressure, how to prioritize, and how to solve problems. At my current job, I manage 3 lawyers who all think their cases are the most important thing in the world. I imagine managing one CEO can't be much harder than that." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "One CEO who thinks his business is the most important thing in the world, you mean?" "Exactly," Tanya said, relieved that he seemed to have a sense of humor about himself. "Tell me about a time when you had to handle a crisis at work," he said, leaning back in his chair. Tanya thought for a moment. "Last month, one of the partners was supposed to fly to Chicago for a deposition, but his flight was canceled due to weather. The deposition couldn't be rescheduled because the witness was flying overseas the next day. I spent 4 hours on the phone with airlines, found him a seat on a different carrier, arranged for a car service to get him to the airport, and had all his documents couriered to the new airline so he could pick them up at check-in. He made the deposition with an hour to spare." Jonathan nodded approvingly. "Good. Initiative and problem-solving skills are essential in this job. The hours can be long and unpredictable. I travel frequently, often on short notice. You'd need to be available evenings and weekends sometimes. Would that be a problem? Not at all, Tanya said. I don't have family obligations that would prevent me from being available when you need me. Something flickered in his expression at the mention of family, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. What are your long-term goals? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? It was the question she'd been dreading. The honest answer was that she hoped to have enough experience and connections to move into a business development role, maybe even start her own consulting firm someday. But she couldn't tell him that, could she? I want to learn as much as I can about business strategy and operations, she said carefully. Working closely with someone like you would give me insights I could never get in a classroom or a smaller company. I'm interested in eventually moving into a more strategic role, but I also understand that being an executive assistant requires dedication and focus. I wouldn't be looking to move on anytime soon. He studied her for a long moment, and Tanya wondered if her ambition had just cost her the job. Some executives wanted assistants who would be content to stay in support roles forever. I appreciate your honesty, he said finally. I'd rather work with someone who has goals and ambition than someone who's just looking for a paycheck. Smart assistants make better partners, and I need a partner more than I need someone to just answer phones and schedule meetings. Partner. The word sent a little thrill through her. I have one more question, he said. Why do you want this job specifically? You could probably find assistant positions at other companies that would pay well and have better work-life balance. Tanya took a breath. This was her chance to be completely honest. Because Carter Industries is building something incredible. I've followed your expansion into renewable energy, your partnerships with developing countries to build sustainable infrastructure. You're not just making money, you're making a difference. I want to be part of that. For the first time since she'd walked into his office, Jonathan looked genuinely surprised. You researched our sustainability initiatives? I read everything I could find about the company before coming here, Tanya admitted. The solar farm project in Kenya, the wind power partnerships in South America, the commitment to carbon neutrality by 2030. It's impressive work. Something shifted in his expression, a warmth that hadn't been there before. Most people only know Carter Industries as a real estate and investment company. They don't pay attention to our environmental work. Then they're not paying attention to the right things, Tanya said. He was quiet for a moment, then stood up. Miss Williams, I think we're done here. Tanya's heart sank. She'd pushed too hard, been too forward. Thank you for your time, Mr. Carter. The job is yours if you want it, he said, cutting her off with a smile. When can you start? She stared at him, sure she'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? You're exactly what I've been looking for. Someone smart, motivated, and genuinely interested in what we're building here. The position comes with a salary of $80,000 to start, full health benefits, 3 weeks vacation and performance bonuses. If that's acceptable to you, I'd like you to start Monday. $80,000. It was more money than Tanya had ever imagined making. More than her parents had made combined when she was growing up. It would mean she could pay off her student loans, maybe even save enough to buy a car that didn't break down every other week. Yes, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Yes, that's more than acceptable. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I won't let you down. I don't think you will, he said, shaking her hand again. And Miss Williams? Call me Jonathan. We're going to be working very closely together. As Tanya left his office, her head was spinning. She'd gotten the job. She was going to be working for one of the most successful businessmen in the country, making more money than she'd ever dreamed of, and contributing to work that actually mattered. She couldn't have known then that she was also about to fall in love with her boss, or that he was already falling for her. All she knew was that her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like floating, and by the time she reached the street she was grinning so hard her cheeks hurt. She pulled out her phone to call Lisa with the good news, but first she took one more look up at the Carter Industries building. Somewhere up there on the 42nd floor, Jonathan Carter was probably already moving on to his next meeting, his next deal, his next challenge. But for just a moment in his office, when she talked about his environmental work, she'd seen something in his eyes that made her think there was more to him than the ruthless businessman the magazines portrayed. She had no idea how right she was or how complicated that would make everything. 3 months into working at Carter Industries, Tanya had settled into a rhythm that amazed even her. Jonathan had been right about the long hours and unpredictable schedule, but she found she didn't mind. Every day brought new challenges, new projects, new opportunities to learn about business at the highest level. She arrived at the office each morning at 7:30, a full hour before Jonathan, to review his schedule and prepare briefing materials for his meetings. By the time he walked through the doors at 8:30 with his coffee and that slightly distracted look he got when he was thinking about a dozen things at once, she had everything organized and ready. "Good morning, Tanya," he said, stopping by her desk as he did every day. "What's the damage today?" "Conference call with the Tokyo team at 9, lunch meeting with the mayor's office about the waterfront development project, and the quarterly board meeting at 3, she said, handing him a folder with all the relevant documents. "Oh, and your sister called. She wants to know if you're bringing a date to your mother's birthday party this weekend." Jonathan's expression darkened slightly. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd pass along the message," Tanya said diplomatically. She'd learned quickly that Jonathan's relationship with his family was complicated. His sister Rebecca called regularly, usually with invitations to family events that Jonathan found reasons to avoid. "Right. Well, tell her I'm traveling this weekend." "But you're not traveling this weekend," Tanya pointed out. "You specifically kept it clear so you could catch up on the Anderson contract review." He looked at her with that expression she was getting used to, the one that was part exasperation and part admiration. "Since when do you keep track of why I keep weekends clear?" "Since it's my job to know your schedule better than you do," she said with a small smile. "Besides, it's your mother's 70th birthday. Don't you think you should be there?" For a moment she thought she'd overstepped. The last thing she wanted was to get too personal with her boss, no matter how comfortable they'd become with each other. But then Jonathan sighed and sat down on the edge of her desk. "My family thinks I work too much," he said. "Every time I see them it's the same conversation. When am I going to settle down? When am I going to give them grandchildren? When am I going to start living my life instead of just building my business?" "And what do you tell them?" "That the business is my life," he said. "Which they don't understand because they think work is just something you do to pay for the life you want to have. They don't get that some of us find purpose in the work itself." Tanya nodded. She understood that feeling. Even in her short time at Carter Industries, she'd begun to feel like the work they were doing mattered in a way her previous jobs never had. "So go to the party and change the subject every time they bring up your personal life. Talk about the Kenya solar project instead. Hard to argue with someone who's bringing electricity to rural villages." Jonathan looked at her with surprise. "You really think I should go?" "I think you'll regret it if you don't," she said honestly. "And I think your mother would be happy to have you there, even if your sister drives you crazy." He was quiet for a moment, then stood up. "Okay. But I'm not going alone." "I'm sure you could find a date if you wanted to," Tanya said, though the thought made her stomach clench unexpectedly. "Actually, I was thinking you could come with me," he said, and Tanya's heart stopped for a moment before starting again at double speed. "As your date?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "As my assistant," he said quickly. "I could tell them you're there to help me handle any business calls that come in. That way they can't complain about me working, and you can run interference when they start asking personal questions." It was a reasonable explanation, and Tanya told herself that the little flutter of disappointment she felt was completely inappropriate. "I don't know if that's such a good idea. Won't they think it's strange that you brought your assistant to a family party?" "They think everything I do is strange," Jonathan said. "Besides, you said yourself that it's your job to know my schedule better than I do. This is just an extension of that." Tanya looked at him, trying to read his expression. Was this really just about having someone to deflect family questions, or was there something more? She'd caught him watching her sometimes during meetings, had noticed the way he smiled when she challenged him on a decision or suggested a different approach. But she could be imagining things, seeing what she wanted to see instead of what was actually there. "Okay," she said finally. "But I'm charging overtime for weekend family therapy." Jonathan laughed, and the sound sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Deal. Fair warning though, my sister is going to interrogate you about your personal life too. She thinks everyone should be married with kids by now." "I can handle your sister," Tanya said with more confidence than she felt. "Good. Because she's going to love you, and that's going to make everything more complicated." There was something in his tone that made her look at him more carefully, but before she could ask what he meant, his phone was ringing and the day was pulling them both back into the familiar rhythm of meetings and deadlines and decisions that affected millions of dollars and thousands of jobs. But for the rest of the day, Tanya found herself thinking about the weekend. About meeting Jonathan's family, about seeing him in a setting that had nothing to do with business or profit margins. About the way he'd looked at her when he'd said his sister was going to love her, like that might not be entirely a good thing. She told herself it was just a work assignment, an extension of her duties as his assistant. She told herself that the flutter of excitement in her stomach was just about getting to see a different side of her boss, nothing more. She was lying to herself, but it would be months before she'd admit it. That Friday afternoon, as she was preparing to leave the office, Jonathan appeared at her desk with a garment bag and a small gift box. "What's this?" she asked. "A dress for tomorrow night," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I had my stylist pick something out. I thought you might not have anything appropriate for this kind of party." Tanya felt her cheeks heat up. "You bought me a dress?" "It's a work expense," he said quickly. "You're representing Carter Industries tomorrow night. Think of it as a uniform." She unzipped the garment bag and gasped. Inside was a stunning navy blue cocktail dress in her exact size, elegant and sophisticated without being flashy. In the gift box were matching heels and a simple pearl necklace. "Jonathan, I can't accept this," she said. "It's too much." "It's not a gift," he insisted. "It's equipment. Like giving you a company laptop or a business card. You need to look the part tomorrow night." "How did you know my size?" He looked even more embarrassed. "I may have asked Rebecca to help. She's good at guessing these things." "You told your sister about me?" "I told her I was bringing my assistant to the party," he said. "She may have gotten the impression that you're important to the company." Important to the company. Tanya wondered if that was all she was, or if there was more behind his careful words. But looking at the beautiful dress, at the thought and care that had gone into choosing it, she decided it didn't matter. Tomorrow night she was going to be Jonathan Carter's assistant at a family party, and maybe, just maybe, she'd get to see who he was when he wasn't being a billionaire CEO. "Thank you," she said. "I'll make sure to represent Carter Industries well." "I know you will," he said. "You always do." And as she watched him walk back to his office, Tanya realized that somewhere in the past 3 months, her feelings for her boss had become much more complicated than simple professional respect. She was in trouble, and the worst part was she wasn't sure she wanted to get out of it. The Carter family estate was everything Tanya had imagined and more. Set on 20 acres in the Hamptons, the house was a sprawling Georgian mansion with manicured gardens and a view of the ocean. As Jonathan's driver pulled up the circular driveway, Tanya felt her nerves spike. "Remember," Jonathan said, straightening his tie, "you're here as my assistant. If anyone asks personal questions, just redirect to business topics." "Got it," Tanya said, smoothing down the navy dress he'd bought her. It fit perfectly, making her feel elegant and confident in a way her usual work clothes never did. "What should I know about your family?" "My mother, Catherine, is a retired art history professor. She'll want to talk about your education and career goals. My father, Robert, sold his accounting firm when I was in college. He'll ask about the business but won't really understand the answers." "And Rebecca?" Jonathan paused. "Rebecca means well, but she has no filter. She'll ask you everything from your relationship status to your 5-year plan within the first 10 minutes. "Sounds lovely," Tanya said dryly. "They are actually," Jonathan admitted. "They just want me to be happy, and they think happiness can only come from marriage and babies and white picket fences." "And you disagree?" He looked at her, something unreadable in his blue eyes. "I think happiness comes from building something meaningful. From working with people who challenge you and support you and make you better than you are alone." There was something in his tone that made Tanya's breath catch, but before she could respond, the driver was opening the door and they were walking up to the front entrance. Rebecca Carter Morrison was waiting for them on the front steps, and she immediately swept Tanya into a hug as if they were old friends. "You must be Tanya," she said, stepping back to look at her approvingly. "Jonathan didn't mention how beautiful you are." "Rebecca," Jonathan said in a warning tone. "What?" "I'm just being friendly." Rebecca grinned at Tanya. "I'm so glad he finally brought someone to one of these things. Even if she is just his assistant." The way she said assistant made it clear she didn't believe that was all Tanya was, and Tanya felt her cheeks warm under her scrutiny. "It's nice to meet you," Tanya said. "Jonathan speaks about you often." "He does." Rebecca looked surprised. "He never tells us anything about his life. We had to Google you to find out he'd hired a new assistant." "You Googled me?" Tanya asked, glancing at Jonathan. "Rebecca has boundary issues," Jonathan said, taking Tanya's arm to guide her into the house. "Let's go find Mom and Dad before she starts asking about your dating history." "Too late," Rebecca said cheerfully, following them. "So are you seeing anyone, Tanya? Because I have to say, my brother could use some female influence in his life. He works too much and never has any fun." "I'm here to work," Tanya said carefully. Jonathan thought it would be good to have someone available in case any urgent calls came in. On a Saturday night? At his mother's birthday party? Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Jonathan, even you aren't that much of a workaholic. Before he could respond, an elegant woman in her 70s appeared in the doorway. Catherine Carter had the same blue eyes as her son, and the same air of quiet intelligence. She was wearing a simple black dress and pearls, but she carried herself like royalty. Jonathan, she said, embracing him warmly. I'm so glad you came. Happy birthday, Mom, he said, kissing her cheek. You look beautiful. And you must be Tanya, Catherine said, turning to her with a genuine smile. I've heard so much about you. All good things, I hope, Tanya said. Jonathan tells us you're the best assistant he's ever had, Catherine said. He says you're brilliant with strategy and that you understand the environmental projects better than most of his board members. Tanya glanced at Jonathan in surprise. She hadn't known he'd talked about her work with his family, and certainly not in such glowing terms. I just try to stay informed about the company's initiatives, she said modestly. Don't let her downplay it, Jonathan said. She's the one who suggested the partnership with the Women's Cooperative in Guatemala. It's going to be one of our most successful projects. The pride in his voice made something flutter in Tanya's chest. She knew he valued her work, but hearing him praise her to his family felt different somehow. More personal. The evening passed in a blur of introductions and conversations. Jonathan's father, Robert, was exactly as described, asking detailed questions about quarterly reports and market projections that made Jonathan's eyes glaze over with patience. But when Tanya steered the conversation toward the company's renewable energy investments, Robert's interest sharpened. That's smart business, he said approvingly. Getting ahead of the regulations instead of fighting them. Whose idea was that? Tanya's actually, Jonathan said. She wrote the report that convinced our board to pivot toward sustainability. Did she now? Robert looked at Tanya with new respect. That's impressive work, young lady. Takes vision to see where the market's heading. As the night went on, Tanya found herself relaxing despite her initial nerves. Jonathan's family was warm and welcoming, and she could see where he'd inherited his intelligence and drive. But she also saw what he meant about their concern for his personal life. Every conversation seemed to circle back to when he might settle down, whether he was dating anyone, why he spent so much time at the office. He's too picky, Rebecca was explaining to Tanya as they stood on the terrace after dinner. I've introduced him to dozens of women over the years, all smart and beautiful and accomplished. But he finds something wrong with every one of them. Maybe he just hasn't met the right person yet, Tanya said diplomatically. Or maybe he has and he's too stubborn to admit it, Rebecca said, giving her a meaningful look. Before Tanya could ask what she meant, Jonathan appeared beside them with 2 glasses of champagne. What are you two conspiring about? He asked, handing Tanya a glass. Just telling Tanya about your terrible track record with women, Rebecca said cheerfully. Remember Jennifer? The lawyer you dated for 3 months and then dumped because she was too career-focused? I didn't dump her because she was career-focused, Jonathan protested. I dumped her because she thought my environmental projects were a waste of money. And Sarah? The artist? She wanted me to quit my job and become a patron of the arts, Jonathan said. She literally told me that making money was beneath people with real intelligence. Rebecca rolled her eyes. There was nothing wrong with Michelle. Michelle was perfect on paper, Jonathan agreed. Beautiful, smart, from a good family, shared all my interests. But, Tanya found herself asking. Jonathan looked at her, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. But she didn't challenge me. Every conversation felt like we were reading from the same script. She agreed with everything I said, never pushed back on my ideas, never made me see things differently. Some men would love that, Rebecca pointed out. I'm not some men, Jonathan said, still looking at Tanya. I need someone who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. Someone who makes me think and keeps me honest and... He trailed off as if realizing he'd said too much. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither of them could name. I should check on Mom, Rebecca said suddenly, and Tanya realized she'd been forgotten in whatever silent conversation was happening between her and Jonathan. They stood alone on the terrace, the sound of the ocean in the distance and the warm glow of the party behind them. Tanya sipped her champagne and tried to think of something to say that would break the tension. Your family is lovely, she said finally. They like you, Jonathan said. Rebecca especially. She thinks you're perfect for me. I'm your assistant, Tanya reminded him, though her heart was beating faster. Right, he said, but he didn't look away. My assistant who writes brilliant strategy reports and challenges my thinking and makes me want to be better at everything I do. Jonathan, she said softly, because the way he was looking at her made her feel like she might forget how to breathe. I know, he said, stepping closer. I know this is complicated. I know you work for me and there are rules about these things and a dozen reasons why this is a bad idea. Then why are we talking about it? She whispered. Because I can't stop thinking about you, he admitted. Because every morning when you hand me my schedule and smile at me like you're genuinely happy to see me, I forget about everything else. Because when you challenged the board about the Guatemala project, I was so proud I wanted to kiss you right there in the conference room. Tanya's breath caught. You can't say things like that to me. Why not? Because I might start believing you mean them. I do mean them, he said, reaching up to touch her cheek. God help me, I mean every word. For a moment, Tanya thought he might actually kiss her. His hand was warm against her skin, and he was looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. But then voices drifted out from the party, reminding them both where they were, and he stepped back. We should go back inside, he said, his voice rough. People will start to wonder where we are. Right? Tanya said, trying to steady her breathing. Of course. But as they walked back into the party, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between them. The careful professional boundaries they'd maintained for months had cracked, and she wasn't sure they could ever be repaired. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Tanya made conversation with Jonathan's relatives, helped serve birthday cake, and played her role as the dedicated assistant perfectly. But she was acutely aware of Jonathan across the room, of the way he kept glancing at her when he thought no one was looking. When they finally left around midnight, the car ride back to the city was quiet. Jonathan stared out the window, and Tanya wondered if he was regretting what he'd said on the terrace. Thank you, he said suddenly. For tonight. You were perfect. Just doing my job, she said, though they both knew it had become much more than that. Tanya, he started, then stopped. What I said earlier about not being able to stop thinking about you. It's okay, she said quickly. We don't have to talk about it. We can pretend it never happened. Can we? He asked, turning to look at her. Because I'm not sure I can pretend anymore. Before she could respond, they were pulling up to her apartment building. Jonathan got out to walk her to the door, ever the gentleman, and they stood awkwardly on the sidewalk. I'll see you Monday, she said. Monday, he agreed. But neither of them moved. Jonathan, she said finally. What happens now? I don't know, he admitted. I just know I don't want things to go back to the way they were before tonight. They can't, she said simply. Everything's different now. He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Good night, Jonathan. Good night, Tanya. She went upstairs and sat by her window, watching his car disappear into the night. Her cheek still tingled where his hand had touched it, and her mind kept replaying his words. I can't stop thinking about you. Monday morning was going to be interesting. Monday morning arrived with the kind of awkward tension Tanya had been dreading. She got to the office early as always, but found herself checking her appearance in the mirror 3 times before Jonathan arrived. When he walked through the doors at 8:30, they both froze for a moment. Good morning, he said, his voice carefully professional. Good morning, she replied, handing him his schedule without meeting his eyes. Conference call with London at 9, lunch with the Peterson Group at noon. Their fingers brushed as he took the folder, and Tanya felt that same electric jolt she'd experienced on the terrace Saturday night. From the way Jonathan's breath caught, he felt it too. Right, he said, clearing his throat. Thank you. It was Rebecca who broke the spell, calling just before lunch to gush about how much everyone had loved Tanya. Mom hasn't stopped talking about her, Rebecca told Jonathan while Tanya listened from her desk. She thinks Tanya is exactly what you need. Smart, beautiful, grounded. When are you going to ask her out properly? Rebecca, she's my employee, Jonathan said, glancing at Tanya through his office window. So, lots of people meet at work. Besides, it's obvious you're crazy about each other. It's not that simple. It is if you want it to be, Rebecca insisted. Life's too short to let the perfect woman slip away because of some stupid company policy. But Jonathan didn't ask her out. Instead, they fell into a strange dance of almost moments and careful professionalism. He'd bring her coffee in the morning, their hands would touch, and for a second their eyes would meet with that same intensity from the terrace. Then one of them would remember where they were, and the moment would pass. 3 weeks after the party, Tanya was working late when her college friend Lisa called. Girl, you sound stressed. Lisa said after hearing Tanya's voice. When's the last time you had fun? Real fun, not work fun. I don't know, Tanya admitted. I've been busy. Too busy for dating? Come on, Tanya. You're 26 and gorgeous and single. You should be out there meeting people, not spending every night at the office with your boss. It's complicated, Tanya said, which was the understatement of the year. It's only complicated if you make it complicated, Lisa said. Look, I'm going to text you the number of this guy Michael. He's a lawyer, really sweet, and he's been asking about you since we all went to that conference last month. Lisa, I don't think. One date, Lisa interrupted. Just one. What's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen, Tanya thought, was that she'd spend the entire evening comparing every man to her boss, who she couldn't have. But maybe that was exactly what she needed. Maybe dating someone else would help her get perspective on her feelings for Jonathan. Okay, she said finally. One date. Michael Rodriguez turned out to be exactly as Lisa had described him. Sweet, smart, successful, and genuinely interested in getting to know her. He took her to a lovely restaurant, asked thoughtful questions about her work, and made her laugh with stories about his own career as a corporate lawyer. You seem distracted, he said gently as they shared dessert. Everything okay? Sorry, Tanya said, realizing she'd been thinking about Jonathan again. About whether he'd eaten dinner, whether he was still at the office, whether he'd wondered where she was tonight. Just work stuff. Must be some job, Michael said. The way your face lit up when you talked about the environmental projects your company is working on, you really care about this stuff. I do, she said, and found herself telling him about the solar farms in Kenya, the wind projects in South America, the difference they were making in communities around the world. It felt good to talk to someone who understood the work without being part of it. Your boss sounds like an interesting guy, Michael said when she finished. He is, Tanya agreed, then quickly changed the subject. By the time Michael walked her to her door, Tanya had to admit she'd enjoyed herself. He was easy to talk to, genuinely kind, and clearly interested in seeing her again. I had a great time tonight, he said. Would you like to do this again sometime? I'd like that, she said and meant it. Maybe this was exactly what she needed. Maybe dating someone available and uncomplicated would help her get over her impossible feelings for Jonathan. She didn't notice Jonathan's car parked across the street, or see the way his hands clenched on the steering wheel as he watched Michael kiss her goodnight on the cheek. The next morning Jonathan was distant and cold. He barely looked at her when she handed him his schedule, and when she tried to brief him on the quarterly reports, he cut her off. Just email me the details, he said curtly. I don't have time to go through everything right now. Is everything all right? Tanya asked. You seem. I'm fine, he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. Just focused on work. As we both should be. The frost lasted all week. Jonathan was perfectly professional but completely impersonal, treating her like she was just another employee instead of the partner he'd claimed he needed. Tanya tried to figure out what she'd done wrong but came up empty. It was Rebecca who inadvertently solved the mystery when she called on Friday afternoon. Is my brother being weird? She asked without preamble. He was supposed to come to dinner last night but canceled at the last minute. Said he was too busy with work, but Mom talked to his doorman and he never left his apartment. He's been a little distant this week, Tanya admitted. You didn't happen to go on a date recently, did you? Tanya's heart stopped. Why would you ask that? Because Jonathan asked me if you were seeing anyone. Very casually, very carefully, like he was trying not to seem interested in the answer. And now he's being weird and moody. So I'm thinking maybe he found out you went out with someone and he's being a jealous idiot about it. He's not jealous, Tanya said, but her pulse was racing. He's my boss. He doesn't care about my personal life. Honey, Rebecca said gently, my brother has been in love with you since the day you started working for him. Everyone can see it except apparently you too. In love with her. The words sent a thrill through Tanya that she tried to suppress. Even if it were true, it didn't change anything. Jonathan had made it clear that nothing could happen between them, and she was finally trying to move on. Even if that were true, she said carefully, it wouldn't matter. We work together. It's complicated. Only because you're both making it complicated, Rebecca said, echoing Lisa's words. But I guess that's not my business. Just be patient with him, okay? He's not good at this stuff. That weekend, Tanya went on a second date with Michael. This time they went to a museum, and she found herself genuinely engaged in their conversation about art and history. Michael was cultured and interesting, and when he took her hand as they walked through the sculpture garden, it felt nice. Comfortable. Not earth-shattering like when Jonathan touched her, but maybe earth-shattering wasn't what she needed. Maybe she needed steady and safe and real. "I really like you, Tanya," Michael said as they sat on a bench overlooking the city. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like we have something special." "I like you too," she said, and it was true. She did like him. He was everything any woman should want in a man. So why did she feel like she was betraying someone when he kissed her? The London offer came on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered by Jonathan himself in a voice so carefully neutral that Tanya knew immediately something was wrong. "The London office needs a new director of international development," he said, not quite meeting her eyes as he placed a folder on her desk. "The position would involve overseeing our European sustainability projects, managing a team of 12, and representing Carter Industries at international conferences." Tanya stared at the folder without opening it. "Okay. Are you asking me to help you find someone for the position?" "I'm asking if you'd be interested in the position yourself." The words hit her like a physical blow. "You want me to move to London?" "I want you to consider an opportunity that would advance your career significantly," Jonathan said, his tone still maddeningly professional. "The salary is substantial, the benefits package includes housing allowance, and it would give you exactly the kind of strategic experience you said you wanted when I first interviewed you." Tanya opened the folder with shaking hands. The salary figure made her gasp. It was nearly double what she was making now, with benefits that would set her up financially for life. Under any other circumstances, it would have been a dream job. "This is a huge opportunity," she said slowly. "It is," Jonathan agreed. "You'd be perfect for it. You understand our environmental initiatives better than anyone, you have the strategic mind for business development, and your presentation skills are exceptional." Everything he was saying made sense, but something felt wrong about the whole conversation. Jonathan was standing too far away, speaking too formally, avoiding eye contact. This wasn't how he usually discussed career opportunities with her. "Why now?" she asked. "I thought you needed me here. You said I was invaluable to your work." Something flickered in his expression. "You are. But this isn't about what I need. It's about what's best for your future. Shouldn't I be the one to decide what's best for my future?" "Of course," he said quickly. "That's why I'm presenting you with the option. No pressure, no expectations. Just an opportunity for you to consider." But there was pressure in the way he held himself rigidly straight, in the careful distance he was maintaining between them, in the way he still wouldn't quite look at her directly. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked. "Take all the time you need," he said. "The position doesn't need to be filled immediately." After he left, Tanya sat staring at the folder for a long time. London. A director-level position. Financial security beyond anything she'd ever imagined. It should have been exciting, but all she felt was a hollow ache in her chest. She called Lisa during her lunch break, needing someone to talk through her confusion. "Wait, let me get this straight," Lisa said after Tanya explained the situation. "Your boss, who you've been in love with for months, is offering you a promotion that would take you to another continent?" "I'm not in love with him," Tanya protested automatically. "Girl, please. You've been moping around for weeks because he's been distant. You barely talk about anything else. And now he's trying to send you away? It's a legitimate career opportunity. It's him trying to solve a problem," Lisa said bluntly. "The problem being that he has feelings for you that he doesn't know what to do with." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Think about it, Tanya. When did this offer come up? Right after you started dating Michael? Right after your boss started acting weird and distant?" Tanya's heart sank as the pieces clicked into place. Jonathan knew about Michael. Somehow he'd found out about her dates, and now he was trying to remove her from the situation entirely. "Even if that were true," she said, "it doesn't change the fact that this is an amazing opportunity." "Do you want it though?" Lisa asked. "Forget about Jonathan for a minute. Forget about Michael. Do you want to move to London and take this job?" Did she? Tanya tried to imagine herself in London, managing European sustainability projects, living in a flat in Camden or Chelsea, building a career that was entirely her own. It should have been appealing. It was everything she'd said she wanted when she first started working for Jonathan. But the thought of leaving made her feel sick. "I don't know," she admitted. "Then you know," Lisa said gently. "You just don't want to admit it." That evening, Tanya was working late when Michael called to ask her to dinner. She'd been seeing him regularly for 2 months now, and their relationship had settled into a comfortable pattern. He was sweet and attentive and everything a woman could want in a boyfriend. So why did she hesitate before saying yes? Over dinner, Michael noticed her distraction immediately. You're doing that thing where you're physically here but mentally somewhere else, he said with a gentle smile. What's going on? Tanya found herself telling him about the London offer, and as she talked, she watched his face fall. That's incredible, Tanya, he said, but his voice was tight. What an opportunity. You don't sound happy about it. I'm happy for you, he said carefully. It's just, I was hoping we were building something together. The timing is difficult. Guilt twisted in Tanya's stomach. Michael was a good man who'd been nothing but kind to her, and she'd been treating their relationship like a distraction from her real life instead of something meaningful in its own right. Michael, It's okay, he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. I understand this is complicated for you. Just, don't make any decisions yet, okay? Give us a chance to figure out where this is going before you run off to London. The word, us, should have made her happy. Michael was clearly ready to take their relationship to the next level, ready to talk about a future together. Instead, all she could think about was Jonathan's face when he'd offered her the promotion. The careful way he'd avoided her eyes, the distance he'd maintained between them. I won't make any hasty decisions, she promised Michael, and meant it. This was too important to rush. But as he walked her home that night, Tanya couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads, and every path forward seemed to lead away from what she really wanted. The next morning she found Jonathan in his office early, staring out the window at the city skyline. Can we talk about London? She asked from the doorway. He turned, and for just a moment his professional mask slipped. She saw something raw and vulnerable in his expression before he composed himself. Of course. Do you have questions about the position? I have questions about why you're really offering it to me. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. I told you. It's a great opportunity for your career. Is that the only reason? Another long pause. What other reason would there be? Tanya stepped into his office and closed the door behind her. Jonathan, we need to talk about what happened at your mother's party. About what's been happening between us. Nothing's been happening between us, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then why does this feel like you're trying to get rid of me? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with months of unspoken feelings and careful professional distance. Because I am, he said finally, and the honesty in his voice took her breath away. Why? Because I can't keep pretending that what I feel for you is professional, he said, his voice rough. Because every day I work with you, I fall a little more in love with you and I can't do anything about it. Because you deserve better than a boss who spends half his time fighting the urge to kiss you in the middle of board meetings. The confession hung between them like a live wire, dangerous and electric. So you're sending me away, she said softly. I'm giving you the chance to build the career you deserve without having to navigate the complications of working for someone who... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. Someone who cares about you more than he should. What if I don't want to go to London? Then you don't go, he said simply. But I needed to give you the option. I needed to know that if you stay, it's because you want to stay, not because you don't have anywhere else to go. Tanya stared at him, her heart pounding. He'd just admitted he was in love with her, but he was still maintaining that distance, still acting like there was no possible future for them. What if I stay? She asked. What happens then? Then we keep working together, he said. And I keep trying to be professional, and you keep being the best assistant I've ever had, and we both pretend this conversation never happened. And what about what we feel for each other? We ignore it, he said firmly. Because the alternative is too complicated, and I won't be the reason your career gets derailed. Tanya wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that maybe some complications were worth it, that maybe they could find a way to make it work. But looking at his face, at the careful wall he'd built around himself, she realized he'd already made up his mind. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need, he repeated. Just, whatever you decide, make sure it's what you really want. Not what you think you should want, not what's expected of you. What you actually want for your life. As she left his office, Tanya realized that for the first time in months, she knew exactly what she wanted. The problem was, the man she wanted had just told her he was trying to get rid of her for her own good. And that was the most Jonathan Carter thing he could possibly do. The decision came to Tanya on a Thursday night, sitting in her apartment with the London contract spread across her coffee table and Michael's latest text asking when they could talk about their future, glowing on her phone screen. She was going to take the job. Not because she particularly wanted to live in London, not because she was excited about managing European sustainability projects, and definitely not because she wanted to put an ocean between herself and Jonathan Carter. She was taking it because he was right about one thing. She needed to know she was staying at Carter Industries for the right reasons, not just because she was in love with her boss. If she could build something meaningful in London, prove to herself that she was capable of success independent of Jonathan, then maybe she could come back someday with a clear head and figure out what she really wanted. And if distance made her realize that what she felt for him was just proximity and professional admiration, then she'd be better off knowing that too. The decision made, she felt strangely calm as she drafted her acceptance email. She'd give Jonathan 2 weeks' notice as his assistant, spend a month training her replacement, and be in London by the end of May. She sent the email at 11 p.m., then turned off her phone and went to bed. The next morning, she arrived at the office to find Jonathan standing by her desk with a coffee and a grim expression. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. In his office with the door closed, he paced behind his desk while she sat in the chair she'd occupied for hundreds of meetings over the past year and a half. "I got your email," he said. "You're really going to do this?" "It's the right decision," Tanya said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "You were right about it being a great opportunity." "I wasn't right about anything," he said, stopping his pacing to look at her. "I was being an idiot and a coward, and now you're leaving because of it." "I'm leaving because I want to," she lied. "This job will be incredible for my career." "Your career was already incredible. You were doing work that mattered, making decisions that affected millions of people. You were my partner in every way that counted except the one that would have made us both happy." The pain in his voice made her chest ache, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Jonathan, we've been over this. It's too complicated." "Everything worthwhile is complicated," he said, coming around the desk to sit on the edge of it, closer to her. "But I was too scared to fight for what we could have been. And now I'm making the decision for both of us," Tanya said. "I'm removing the complication. By running away. By taking control of my life and my career," she corrected. "This isn't running away. This is moving forward." Jonathan stared at her for a long moment. "Is this about Michael?" The question caught her off guard. "What? The lawyer you've been seeing. Is this about him? Are you trying to get away from me so you can build something with him?" Tanya felt heat rise in her cheeks. "How do you know about Michael?" "I saw him drop you off the other night when I was working late. I saw him kiss you goodnight." Jonathan's jaw was tight. It looked serious. The jealousy in his voice should have made her happy, but instead it just made her angry. "So that's what this is about? You offer me a job in London because you can't handle seeing me with someone else?" "I offered you the job because you deserve better than being stuck as someone's assistant forever," he said. "The fact that you're dating someone else just made it clearer that I needed to step back." "Well, congratulations," Tanya said, standing up. "Mission accomplished. I'll be out of your hair in 6 weeks. She started toward the door, but his voice stopped her. "Tanya, wait. This isn't how I wanted this to go." "How did you want it to go?" she asked without turning around. "Did you want me to thank you for making my career decisions for me? Did you want me to be grateful that you decided what was best for my life without consulting me?" "I wanted," he sighed. "I wanted you to be happy. Even if it wasn't with me." The sincerity in his voice broke something inside her chest. She turned back to face him, and the look in his eyes nearly undid her resolve. "I am happy," she said softly. "Or I will be. This is what I need to do." Jonathan nodded slowly. "Then I'll support your decision. And I'll make sure the transition goes smoothly." "Thank you. For what it's worth," he added as she reached the door, "London is going to be very lucky to have you. And I'm going to miss working with you more than I can say." "I'll miss it too," she admitted, then left his office before she could change her mind. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of training sessions, goodbye lunches, and increasingly complicated feelings about Michael. He'd been supportive about her decision to take the London job, even suggesting that maybe a long-distance relationship could work if they were both committed to making it work. "I could visit you," he said over dinner 2 weeks before her departure. "And you'll be back for holidays and vacation. It doesn't have to be the end for us." Tanya looked at his earnest, hopeful face and felt nothing but guilt. Michael was a genuinely good man who deserved someone who was as invested in their relationship as he was. And she wasn't that person. "Michael," she said gently, "I think we need to be realistic about this. Long-distance relationships are hard under the best circumstances, and I'm going to be completely focused on this new job for the foreseeable future." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we should take a break. See how we both feel in a few months, once I'm settled in London." She could see the disappointment in his eyes, but he nodded graciously. "If that's what you think is best." I do, she said, hating herself for hurting him but knowing it was the right thing to do. Her last day at Carter Industries was a Friday in May. The office threw her a small goodbye party, complete with cake and speeches about how much she'd contributed to the company's success. Jonathan made appropriate remarks about her being missed and wished her well in London, but his words were carefully professional. It wasn't until everyone else had left and she was packing the last of her personal items that he appeared at her desk one final time. All set, he asked. I think so, she said, taping up the box that contained 2 years of her life at Carter Industries. I have something for you, he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. A letter of recommendation in case you need it? Though I can't imagine you will. She took the envelope, their fingers brushing one last time. Thank you. Tanya, he said, and something in his voice made her look up. I want you to know that these past 2 years working with you have been the best of my professional life. You made me a better CEO and a better person. Jonathan. I know we can't go back and change anything, he continued. But I want you to know that if circumstances were different, if I were braver, if the situation were less complicated, I would have fought for you. For us. Tears pricked at her eyes. I know. Do you? He asked. Because sometimes I think you believe I'm sending you away because I don't care about you. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. I know you care about me, she said softly. That's what makes this so hard. They stood there for a moment, two people who had found something rare and precious and were about to let it slip away because they were both too afraid to fight for it. Will you stay in touch? He asked finally. Of course, she said, though they both knew how these things went. A few emails at first, maybe a call on holidays, then gradually less and less until they became just people who used to know each other. Take care of yourself, Tanya. You too, Jonathan. He turned to go, then looked back one more time. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right decision. You're going to do incredible things in London. After he left, Tanya sat alone in the empty office for a few minutes, looking out at the city where she'd fallen in love with her boss and was now leaving to get over him. Tomorrow she'd fly to London and start a new chapter of her life. She'd build a successful career, maybe meet someone new, definitely prove to herself that she could succeed on her own terms. But tonight, she let herself grieve for what might have been if they'd both been brave enough to try. London had been everything Tanya hoped it would be and nothing like she'd expected. The work was challenging and rewarding, her team was brilliant and collaborative, and she'd successfully launched 3 major sustainability initiatives that were already making measurable environmental impact across Europe. She'd also been miserably lonely for most of it. Oh, she'd made friends, dated occasionally, explored the city and traveled across the continent. She'd grown professionally in ways that surprised even her, developing confidence in her leadership abilities and strategic thinking that she might never have discovered if she'd stayed as Jonathan's assistant. The scared, uncertain woman who'd left New York 2 years ago had been replaced by someone who commanded rooms full of executives and negotiated with government officials in 4 different languages. But she'd never stopped missing Jonathan Carter. She thought of him when she walked through Hyde Park and remembered their conversations about environmental policy. She thought of him when she closed a particularly difficult deal and wanted to share the victory with someone who would understand the complexity of what she'd accomplished. She thought of him late at night in her flat in Chelsea when the loneliness got so overwhelming that she'd draft emails to him that she never sent. They'd kept in touch sporadically as promised. Professional updates mostly, congratulations on new projects, holiday greetings. But their correspondence had grown shorter and less frequent over time, until now they barely communicated at all. Which was why she was surprised to get a call from Rebecca Carter on a Tuesday morning in March. Tanya? It's Rebecca. Jonathan's sister. Rebecca, hi, Tanya said, her heart rate immediately spiking at the sound of a familiar voice from her old life. Is everything okay? That's what I'm calling to find out, Rebecca said. When's the last time you talked to my brother? I don't know, maybe 6 months ago? We exchanged congratulations when Carter Industries landed that contract with the Australian government. Why? Rebecca sighed. He's been different since you left. Distant, work-obsessed even more than usual. He barely comes to family events, never dates anyone for more than a few weeks, and according to his new assistant, he's been working 18-hour days for the past year. That sounds like Jonathan, Tanya said carefully, trying to ignore the way her chest tightened at the thought of him burning himself out. It's worse than usual though, Rebecca insisted. And Mom is worried sick. She thinks he's depressed. I'm sorry to hear that, Tanya said. But I'm not sure why you're calling me about it. Because you're the only person who ever made him happy, Rebecca said bluntly. Because he's been in love with you for 4 years and sending you to London was the stupidest thing he's ever done, and now he's too proud to admit it. Tanya's heart stopped. Rebecca. I know. It's complicated, he's your former boss, there are professional considerations. But life is short, Tanya. And my brother is miserable without you. Before Tanya could respond, her secretary knocked on her office door. Miss Williams? Your 10 o'clock is here. I have to go, Tanya told Rebecca. But, thank you for calling. I'll think about what you said. Think fast, Rebecca said. Because I have a feeling he's not going to wait forever. The call left Tanya distracted for the rest of the day. By evening she was standing in her flat with a glass of wine and Jonathan's business card, which she'd kept in her wallet for 2 years. Before she could talk herself out of it, she dialed his number. Jonathan Carter. The sound of his voice, deeper and more tired than she remembered, made her eyes well up with unexpected tears. Hi, she said. It's Tanya. Silence. Then, Tanya. Well, how are you? I'm good. Busy. You know how it is. She took a breath. Rebecca called me today. Of course she did, Jonathan said with a sigh. What did my sister tell you? That you've been working too hard. That your family is worried about you. I'm fine, he said automatically. Just focused on the business. Jonathan. Her voice was gentle but firm. Are you really fine? Another long pause. No, he admitted finally. I'm not fine. But I'm managing. Tell me what's going on. Nothing's going on, he said, but she could hear the exhaustion in his voice. Business is good. The renewable energy division has exceeded all projections. The Kenya project just expanded to 3 more countries. That's not what I meant and you know it. Tanya, he said softly, why did you really call? The question hung between them across thousands of miles of ocean and 2 years of careful distance. Because I miss you, she said before she could stop herself. Because I think about you every day and because Rebecca says you're working yourself to death, and I can't stand the thought of you being unhappy. I'm not your responsibility anymore, he said, but his voice was gentler than his words. You were never my responsibility, she replied. You were my friend. My partner. My. She stopped, unable to say the word that had been echoing in her heart for 2 years. You're what? He asked quietly. The person I was in love with, she whispered. The person I'm still in love with, even though I moved to another continent to get over you. The silence stretched so long that she wondered if the call had dropped. Tanya, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, you can't say things like that to me. Why not? Because I've spent 2 years trying to convince myself that letting you go was the right thing to do. Because I've been telling myself that you're better off without me, that you're building an incredible life in London, that you're happy. I am building an incredible life, she said. But I'm not happy. Not really. Not without you. What are you saying? I don't know, she admitted. I just know that I can't pretend anymore that what we had was just professional. I can't pretend that I took this job for my career when really I took it because I was scared of how much I loved you and how complicated that made everything. Jonathan was quiet for so long that she started to panic. Jonathan? Are you still there? I'm here, he said. I'm just trying to figure out what to do with the fact that the woman I've been in love with for 4 years just told me she loves me too. What do you want to do with it? I want to get on a plane to London right now, he said. I want to show up at your door and tell you that the last 2 years have been the worst of my life because you weren't in it. I want to ask you to come home. Why don't you? Because nothing's changed, he said. I'm still a workaholic CEO who doesn't know how to balance business and personal life. You're still building an incredible career that you shouldn't have to give up for anyone, including me. And I still don't know how to make this work without one of us sacrificing everything. What if we figured it out together? She asked. What if we stopped trying to protect each other from complications and just tried? What about your job? Your life in London? Tanya looked around her flat, at the life she'd built that looked perfect on paper but felt empty without the one person who made her feel complete. I can do environmental work anywhere, she said. But I can only love you here. That doesn't make sense, Jonathan said, but she could hear the smile in his voice. It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be true. 3 weeks later, Tanya was back in New York for what was supposed to be a brief visit to finalize some international partnerships. She'd been nervous about seeing Jonathan again after their phone call, unsure if the feelings they'd expressed would translate to reality after so much time and distance. She needn't have worried. He was waiting for her at the airport, looking older and more tired than she remembered but still devastatingly handsome in his perfectly tailored coat. When she saw him standing there with flowers in his hands and love written all over his face, she dropped her luggage and ran to him. Their kiss in the middle of JFK's International Arrivals Terminal was 2 years in the making, desperate and tender and perfect. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. "Welcome home," he whispered against her forehead. "I'm not sure this is home anymore," she said. "I live in London now, remember? Home is wherever you are," he said simply. "If that's London, then I'll figure out how to make that work." But as they drove into the city, as she saw the familiar skyline and breathed the familiar air, Tanya realized that home had never been a place for her. Home was the man sitting next to her, the partnership they'd built, the love they'd been too afraid to claim. Home was Jonathan Carter, and she was finally ready to fight for it. The crisis that changed everything came on a Thursday morning, 3 days into what was supposed to be Tanya's week-long visit to New York. She was in Jonathan's office, officially there to discuss potential partnerships between Carter Industries and her European projects, but really just soaking up the familiar rhythm of working beside him again. That's when Richard Thompson burst through the door without knocking, his face pale and his hands shaking. "We have a problem," he announced. "A big one." Jonathan looked up from the contract they'd been reviewing. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that could destroy the company," Richard said, sinking into a chair. "I just got off the phone with our legal team. There's been a leak about the Indonesia project." Tanya felt Jonathan go rigid beside her. The Indonesia project was Carter Industries' most ambitious undertaking yet, a massive sustainable development initiative that would bring clean energy to remote villages while creating thousands of jobs. It was also highly confidential, as the political situation in the region was delicate. "What kind of leak?" Jonathan asked, his voice deadly calm. "Environmental groups are claiming we're planning to cut down protected rainforest for the solar installations. The Indonesian government is furious, threatening to pull out of the deal entirely. And somehow, the press has gotten hold of preliminary environmental impact reports that were never supposed to see the light of day." "Those reports were incomplete," Jonathan said, standing up to pace behind his desk. "They didn't include our revised plans or the conservation measures we developed with local environmental groups. Try explaining that to the protesters currently surrounding our Jakarta offices," Richard said grimly. "Or to the investors who are panicking about the potential financial losses if this deal falls through." Tanya watched Jonathan's face cycle through anger, frustration, and determination. This was the side of him she'd always admired most, the way he could face a crisis head-on and start strategizing solutions while other people were still processing the problem. "Who had access to those preliminary reports?" he asked. "Internal team only. Maybe a dozen people total, all of whom signed confidentiality agreements." "Someone talked," Jonathan said flatly. "Question is who and why." "There's more," Richard said reluctantly. "The leak came with accusations of corporate colonialism. Claims that we're exploiting developing nations for profit while destroying their natural resources." "That's the opposite of what we're doing," Tanya said, unable to stay silent. "The Indonesia project is about sustainable development in partnership with local communities. You've spent 2 years making sure every aspect of it respects environmental and cultural concerns." Both men looked at her, and she realized she'd spoken as if she were still part of the team. Old habits. "She's right," Jonathan said. "But perception is reality in situations like this. We need to get ahead of the story before it spirals completely out of control." "How?" Richard asked. "The environmental groups won't listen to us. The Indonesian government doesn't trust us. And the media is having a field day with the David versus Goliath angle." Jonathan was quiet for a moment, his brilliant mind clearly working through possibilities. Then he turned to Tanya. "You still have contacts in the international environmental community, don't you? From your work in London?" "Some," she said carefully. "Why?" "Because we need someone they trust to explain what we're actually trying to accomplish. Someone who can speak their language and has credibility in sustainability circles." "Jonathan," she said, understanding where he was going with this, "I can't officially represent Carter Industries. I don't work here anymore. But you know this project better than anyone except me," he said. "You helped design the community partnership model. You wrote the original environmental protection protocols." It was true. Even from London, Tanya had been consulted on various aspects of the Indonesia project. Jonathan had asked for her input on everything from solar panel placement to community engagement strategies, and she'd been happy to help despite their complicated personal situation. "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "That you help us save this project," he said simply. "Not as a Carter Industries employee, but as an independent environmental consultant." Someone with an impeccable reputation who can vouch for the integrity of what we're trying to do. Richard looked skeptical. No offense, Tanya, but you're hardly an impartial observer. Everyone knows you used to work for Jonathan. Used to being the key phrase, she said, an idea beginning to form. What if that's actually an advantage? What if I publicly broke with Carter Industries over environmental concerns, but then did my own independent investigation of the Indonesia project? Jonathan stared at her. You want to fake a professional falling out? Not fake, she said slowly, the plan crystallizing in her mind. I genuinely do have concerns about some multinational corporations' approach to sustainability. I could go on record expressing those concerns, maybe even criticizing some of Carter Industries' past projects in general terms. Then, when I investigate Indonesia and find that this project is different, that Carter Industries is genuinely committed to environmental protection, it carries more weight. That's brilliant, Richard said, looking impressed. If you're seen as a critic who was convinced by the evidence, people will listen. But Jonathan was shaking his head. I won't let you damage your professional reputation to save my company. It won't damage my reputation, Tanya said. Environmental advocates who ask tough questions and demand accountability are respected. And when I endorse a project after thorough investigation, that endorsement means something. The risks are mine to take, she said firmly. Jonathan, this project will bring electricity to villages that have never had it. It will create jobs and economic opportunity in regions that desperately need both. And it will do all of that while actually improving environmental outcomes. That's worth fighting for. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the exact moment when he stopped seeing her as someone he needed to protect and started seeing her as the partner she'd always been. Okay, he said. But we do this right. Full transparency between us, even if we're pretending to be adversaries in public. And if at any point you think the risks are too high, you pull out. Agreed, she said. But I won't pull out. We're going to save this project. The next 72 hours were a blur of strategic planning and careful choreography. Tanya held a press conference announcing her concerns about multinational corporations' environmental practices, specifically mentioning Carter Industries among several companies she felt needed to be held more accountable. The statement was carefully worded to sound critical without being libelous, and it accomplished exactly what they'd hoped. Environmental groups took notice. Meanwhile, Jonathan publicly defended his company's record while acknowledging that they could always do better. The staged tension between them was subtle but effective, creating the impression that Tanya had become a more critical voice on sustainability issues. Behind the scenes, they worked 18-hour days coordinating their response to the Indonesia crisis. Tanya reached out to her contacts in environmental organizations, offering to conduct an independent investigation of the project. Jonathan provided her with complete access to all documents and personnel, knowing that her reputation for integrity would lend credibility to whatever she found. It was exhausting, high-stakes work that required perfect coordination between them. It was also the most natural thing in the world. They fell back into their old rhythm as if the 2-year separation had never happened, finishing each other's sentences and anticipating each other's needs. On the fourth night, working alone in the conference room at midnight while they prepared for Tanya's departure to Indonesia, Jonathan looked up from his laptop. I missed this, he said quietly. Missed what? She asked, not looking up from the environmental impact report she was reviewing. Working with you. The way your mind works, the way you see angles I miss, the way you make everything better just by being involved. She did look up then, meeting his tired but determined gaze across the table covered with documents and coffee cups. I missed it too, she admitted. More than I let myself realize until I was back here, doing this work again. What does that mean for us? He asked. After Indonesia, after this crisis is resolved, what happens then? I don't know, she said honestly. But I know I don't want to go back to London and pretend we're just former colleagues who exchange holiday cards. What do you want? I want to be your partner, she said. In every sense of the word. I want to work beside you on projects that matter, and I want to come home to you at night, and I want to stop being scared of how much I love you. Jonathan stood up and walked around the table to her. And your career? Your independence? All the things that were so important that you moved to another continent. They're still important, she said, standing to meet him. But I realized something in London. I can build a successful career anywhere, but I can only build a life with the person I love. And I love you, Jonathan Carter. I've loved you for 4 years, and I'm tired of letting fear keep us apart. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb tracing along her cheek. I love you too. I've loved you since the day you told me I should go to my mother's birthday party. I've loved you through 2 years of trying to forget you. And I'll love you for the rest of my life if you'll let me. When he kissed her this time, it wasn't desperate like at the airport. It was sure and steady and full of promise. It was the kiss of two people who had finally stopped running from what they felt and were ready to build something beautiful together. So what now? She asked when they broke apart. Now we go to Indonesia and save this project, he said. Then we come home and figure out how to make this work. Together. Together, she agreed. And for the first time in 2 years, the word felt like a promise instead of an impossibility. The flight to Jakarta was 16 hours of careful planning and nervous energy. Tanya had to maintain her role as an independent investigator while Jonathan played the defensive CEO, but in the privacy of his first-class cabin, they worked together like the team they'd always been. The protesters will be at the hotel, Jonathan warned as they prepared for landing. Whatever happens, don't let them provoke you into saying something we'll regret later. I've handled hostile crowds before, Tanya reminded him. Remember the board meeting when the shareholders tried to vote down the Kenya project? That was different. Those were businessmen in suits, not environmental activists who think I'm the enemy. They don't think you're the enemy yet, she said. They think Carter Industries might be the enemy. There's a difference and I'm going to help them see it. The scene at the hotel was exactly as chaotic as Jonathan had predicted. Environmental protesters lined the sidewalks with signs reading, "Stop Corporate Colonialism," and "Protect Our Forests." When they spotted Jonathan getting out of his car, the crowd surged forward with cameras and shouted questions. Tanya, arriving separately, pushed through the crowd with the confidence of someone who belonged there. "Ms. Williams," a reporter called out, recognizing her from the press conference in New York. "Are you here to investigate Carter Industries' environmental practices?" "I'm here to find the truth," she said simply. "The people of Indonesia deserve to know whether this project will help or harm their communities and their environment." Over the next 5 days, Tanya threw herself into the investigation with the thoroughness that had made her successful in London. She visited the proposed sites, interviewed local community leaders, met with environmental scientists, and reviewed every document related to the project. What she found was exactly what she'd expected. A meticulously planned initiative that would bring sustainable energy to remote communities while actually improving environmental outcomes. The preliminary reports that had leaked were indeed incomplete and misleading. The full project included extensive conservation measures, partnerships with local environmental groups, and economic opportunities for indigenous communities. But she also found something she hadn't expected. Genuine concerns from local leaders about whether Carter Industries could be trusted to follow through on their promises. Too many multinational corporations had made grand commitments only to cut corners when profits were at stake. On her 4th day in country, she was meeting with a group of village elders when one of them asked the question that cut to the heart of everything. "Why should we trust this American company?" the elderly woman asked through a translator. "What proof do we have that they will keep their word?" It was a fair question, and Tanya found herself thinking not about corporate policies or legal contracts, but about the man she'd fallen in love with 4 years ago. "Because I know the person making these promises," she said finally. "I know his character, his integrity, his commitment to doing the right thing even when it's difficult. I know that he would rather lose money than break his word to your communities." Later that evening she found Jonathan on the hotel balcony, staring out at the Jakarta skyline and looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. "How bad was today?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. "3 more board members called demanding we pull out of the project entirely," he said. "The stock price has dropped 12% since this story broke. And the Indonesian government is giving us 48 hours to address the environmental concerns or they're canceling the contract. What if I told you I think we can save it?" He looked at her with surprise. "Really? The project is sound, Jonathan. Better than sound, actually. It's exactly what you promised it would be, sustainable development that benefits everyone involved. The problem isn't the project itself, it's trust. How do we solve a trust problem? By being completely transparent," she said. "No more preliminary reports, no more confidential documents. We make everything public. Environmental impact assessments, community partnership agreements, profit-sharing structures, everything. That's commercially risky," he said. "Our competitors will have access to all our strategies. And the communities you're trying to help will have proof that you're serious about keeping your promises," she countered. "Trust has to go both ways." Jonathan was quiet for a moment, considering. "You really think this will work?" "I think it's our best shot. But there's something else we need to discuss." "What's that?" Tanya took a deep breath. I want to come back to New York. Not to London, not to some other opportunity. I want to come home and work with you again. As my assistant? As your partner, she said. Not just in business but in everything. I want us to stop pretending that what we feel for each other is a complication and start treating it like the foundation for something incredible. Jonathan turned to face her fully. What about everything you built in London? Your career, your independence, your success? I can build those things with you too, she said. Maybe even better because I won't be doing it alone. The board will have opinions about me dating a senior executive. Then we deal with the board, she said simply. Together. He was quiet for so long that she started to worry she'd misread the situation. Maybe the crisis had brought them together temporarily, but maybe he still believed their relationship was too complicated to work. There's something I need to tell you, he said finally. About why I really offered you the London job 2 years ago. I know why you offered it, she said. Because you thought it was best for my career. That's what I told myself, he agreed. But the real reason was because I was scared. Scared of how much I loved you, scared of messing up the best working relationship I'd ever had, scared that if we tried and failed, I'd lose you completely. And now I realize that I lost you anyway, he said. For 2 years, I lost the most important person in my life because I was too much of a coward to fight for what we could have had. He stood up and moved to the balcony railing, his back to her. I don't want to be that coward anymore, Tanya. I want to fight for you, for us, for the life we could build together. If you'll let me. She joined him at the railing, close enough to touch but not quite touching yet. What does that look like? It looks like you coming home to New York as my partner in every sense of the word, he said. It looks like us working together to build something meaningful, both professionally and personally. It looks like me being brave enough to love you the way you deserve to be loved. And what about the complications? The board, the media, the people who will say we're mixing business with pleasure? Jonathan turned to face her, and the look in his eyes took her breath away. Let them talk. I'd rather have a complicated life with you than a simple life without you. Is that a proposal? She asked, her heart racing. It's a promise, he said, taking her hands. A promise that I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice. That we made the right choice. When he kissed her this time, with the Jakarta skyline glittering below them and their future stretching out bright and uncertain ahead, Tanya felt like she was finally coming home. The press conference the next day was standing room only. Environmental activists, government officials, media representatives, and business leaders packed the hotel conference room as Tanya presented her findings. After 5 days of comprehensive investigation, she began, I can state unequivocally that the Carter Industries Indonesia project represents a new model for sustainable international development. This is not corporate colonialism disguised as environmentalism. This is genuine partnership between a multinational corporation and local communities. She detailed her findings methodically, explaining how the project would actually improve environmental outcomes while bringing economic opportunities to indigenous communities. She announced Carter Industries' commitment to complete transparency, with all project documents being made publicly available. But most importantly, she concluded, I've seen firsthand the commitment of Carter Industries' leadership to keeping their promises. This project will succeed because the people behind it have the integrity to do what they say they'll do, even when it's difficult. The room erupted in questions, but Tanya fielded them with the confidence of someone who had done her homework thoroughly. By the end of the session, even the most skeptical environmental activists seemed cautiously optimistic. Later, as the crowd dispersed and the crisis began to feel manageable for the first time in a week, Jonathan found her packing up her presentation materials. You did it, he said simply. You saved the project. We did it, she corrected. Just like we always did everything else. Together. Speaking of together, he said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. I know this isn't the most romantic setting, and I know we just decided to stop being scared of complications, but I can't wait another day to ask you this. Tanya's hands flew to her mouth as he got down on one knee right there in the empty conference room. Tanya Williams, he said, his voice shaking slightly, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in business and in life? Will you help me build something beautiful together? Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes to all of it. Yes to everything. The ring was perfect, a simple diamond solitaire that caught the light like the promise of their future together. As Jonathan slipped it onto her finger, Tanya thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The years of professional partnership, the complicated feelings they'd tried to ignore, the separation that had taught them both what they truly valued, and now this. a second chance to get it right. "I love you," she said as he stood up to kiss her again. "I love you too," he replied. "And I can't wait to spend the rest of my life showing you how much." 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony in the Hamptons, surrounded by family and the friends who had watched them dance around each other for years. Rebecca gave a maid of honor speech that made everyone cry, talking about how she'd always known her brother and Tanya belonged together, even when they were too stubborn to see it themselves. Carter Industries' Indonesia project became a model for sustainable international development, winning awards and inspiring similar initiatives around the world. Tanya returned to New York as Chief Operating Officer, a role that let her combine her strategic mind with her passion for environmental work. But more than that, they built a life together that honored both their ambitions and their love for each other. They worked together during the day, building something meaningful that would outlast them both. And they came home to each other every night, grateful for the second chance they'd almost let slip away. Sometimes the best love stories weren't about finding someone new, but about being brave enough to fight for someone you'd already found. Dear readers, thank you for joining Jonathan and Tanya on their journey from professional partnership to true love. Their story reminds us that sometimes the person who's meant for us is right in front of us, even when circumstances make it seem impossible. What did you think of their journey? Did you find yourself rooting for them from the beginning, or were you frustrated by their hesitation to act on their feelings? Have you ever been in a situation where professional boundaries complicated personal relationships? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on workplace romance and second chances. Also, what moment in their story resonated most with you? Was it their first almost kiss at the family party, the pain of separation when Tanya moved to London, or their ultimate reunion and engagement in Jakarta? Let me know which scene touched your heart the most.